Now on Taiwan, because I know that's on everybody's mind today. I want to reaffirm that the Speaker has not confirmed any travel plans, and it is for the Speaker to do so and her staff. So we won't be commenting or speculating about the stops on her trip. We have been clear from the very beginning that she will make her own decisions and that Congress is an independent branch of government. Our Constitution embeds a separation of powers. This is well known to the PRC, given our more than 4 decades of diplomatic relations. The Speaker has the right to visit Taiwan, and the Speaker of the House has visited Taiwan before, without incident, as have many members of Congress, including this year. Now, the world has seen the United States government be very clear that nothing has changed about our One China policy, which is, of course, guided by the Taiwan Relations Act, the 3 joint U.S.-PRC communiques, and the 6 assurances. We have said, and we have repeatedly said, that we oppose any unilateral changes to the status quo from either side. We have said that we do not support Taiwan independence, and we have said that we expect cross-strait differences to be resolved by peaceful means. We have communicated this directly to the PRC at the highest levels, including as recently as last week in the phone call between President Biden and President Xi. The National Security Advisor, the Secretaries of State and Defense, the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff have also made this very clear to Beijing in a half a dozen recent high-level conversations. Put simply, there is no reason for Beijing to turn a potential visit consistent with long-standing U.S. policy into some sort of crisis or conflict, or use it as a pretext to increase aggressive military activity in or around the Taiwan Strait. And yet, over the weekend, even before Speaker Pelosi arrived in the region, China conducted a live-fire exercise. China appears to be positioning itself to potentially take further steps in the coming days and perhaps over longer time horizons. Now, these potential steps from China could include military provocations, such as firing missiles in the Taiwan Strait or around Taiwan, operations that break historical norms, such as large-scale air entry into Taiwan's Air Defense Identification Zone, ADIZ, I think you all know that acronym, air or naval activities that cross the median line, and military exercises that could be highly publicized. This could also include actions in the diplomatic and economic space, such as further spurious legal claims by Beijing's public assertions last month, like Beijing's public assertions last month that the Taiwan Strait is not an international waterway. Some of these actions would continue concerning trend lines that we've seen in recent years, but some could be of a different scope and scale. The last time Beijing fired missiles into the Taiwan Strait was 1995 and 1996, after Beijing reacted provocatively to Taiwan's president's visit to deliver an address at his alma mater. I want to contrast this now between the United States and China. We, and countries around the world, believe escalation serves no one. Beijing's actions could have unintended consequences that only serve to increase tensions. Meanwhile, our actions are not threatening, and they break no new ground. Nothing about this potential visit, which, oh, by the way, has precedent, would change the status quo. And the world should reject any PRC effort to use it to do so. We will not take the bait or engage in saber rattling. At the same time, we will not be intimidated. We will keep operating in the seas and the skies of the Western Pacific as we have for decades. We will continue to support cross-strait peace and stability, support Taiwan, of course, defend a free and open Indo-Pacific, and we're still going to seek to maintain lines of communication with Beijing. All of that is important, and all of it is preserving the status quo. We expect to see Beijing continue to use inflammatory rhetoric and disinformation in the coming days. The United States, by contrast, will act with transparency. We'll stand up here, we'll answer your questions, we'll give you the facts. We are also committed to keeping open lines of communication with Beijing, as I said. This is what the world expects of not just the United States, but of China. And we encourage Beijing to keep that commitment as well. With that, go to some questions.
Thanks, John. So given all the saber rattling that's being done by China and the fact that Speaker Pelosi is still considering a trip, the fact that you're laying out all the possible reactions that China could have, should we take this as a sort of test of China's willingness to make good on some of its designs on Taiwan, or a test of whether they've learned some of the lessons that Russia learned by invading Ukraine?
The short answer to your question, and then I promise I won't just leave it with a short answer, is that's a better question for President Xi, and what's in his mind over this. I think we've laid out very clearly that if she goes, it's not without precedent. It's not new. It doesn't change anything. I mean, what we would hope they infer from everything we've done and everything we've said, including during the president's phone call, is that we're being consistent. There's no change. We've not ramped up the rhetoric. We've not changed our behavior. Everything we've done is consistent with our obligations and our commitments.
But if the policy hasn't changed, then why was the speaker being urged not to go?
I don't know that she was urged not to go. Who urged her not to go?
The president said on August 20th that the military doesn't think it's a good idea for her to go.
The speaker makes her own decisions. What we did was provide her context, analysis, facts, information, so that she could make the best decision possible for every stop, for every overseas travel. And again, I'm not going to get ahead of her or her staff here with respect to the rest of this trip.
Does the U.S. military still think it's not a good idea?
I would refer you to the military. Again, we as a national security team, not just DOD, we are obligated, and we take that obligation seriously, to make sure she has all the context she needs before she travels overseas, and we did that. And oh, by the way, we'll continue to do that throughout the remainder of her trip for anything else that she needs to make sure she has a successful visit.
Russia follow-up?
John, thank you. You've been emphasizing the separation of powers and the separation of the legislative branch from the executive. Does the White House feel confident that President Xi understands that separation?
As I said in my opening statement, we've had, diplomatic and bilateral relations with the PRC for decades. They understand well. I can't speak for President Xi. I wouldn't do that. But our assumption is they understand very well how our Constitution is organized and that there are 3 equal branches of government.
I don't think I'm hearing you say yes to that question.
I said it in my opening statement that the PRC understands well the separation of powers.
If you are confident about that, was this an issue that President Biden raised directly with President Xi during their phone call? We didn't get a very detailed readout of the detailed discussions they had during that phone call last week.
The president, in his conversation with President Xi, made clear that Congress is an independent branch of government, and that Speaker Pelosi makes her own decisions, as other members of Congress do, about their overseas travel. That was made clear.
Can I just do one more follow-up? If the policy is that the president wouldn't encourage or discourage a lawmaker from traveling to a specific place because of the separation, if a senior lawmaker were to plan a trip right now to, say, North Korea or Moscow, would we not hear the president weigh in those instances?
I think you would see the president be consistent. We provide members of Congress facts, analysis, context. They make their own decisions about where and when they're going to travel. We do the best we can to provide advice and counsel and context and information, and that will continue. There's nothing inconsistent about that at all. I just realized I have my badge on. I got to take this off.
Has anyone in the administration or in this White House explicitly spoken with the speaker and said you should not go on the trip? I know the president has not done that, but has there been any communication from senior national security officials inside this White House?
There have been direct conversations with the speaker and her staff before she left at various levels in the national security establishment. The president did not speak directly with the speaker about this trip. I am not going to divulge the contents of those conversations that we have, I mean, with her, particularly with the speaker. I will just go back to what I said before, Tyler. Fulsome discussions, context, analysis, facts, information about her overseas travel, which is completely consistent with the way we do it in the past.
Understood. It seems like this trip obviously is sparking a little bit more anxiety inside this building and throughout the administration. And I understand that you said the president respects the independence, but given the national security risks at play and China's escalating rhetoric, was there not a discussion inside this administration about whether or not you should take a more urgent stance, as MJ just alluded to, if there were other countries at play here, we might see a different response, given what China has said it might do in response to a trip that puts all Americans at risk in their national security. Did the president feel that maybe this is a different case, that he should be more involved, or his team should be more involved than he might be?
I mean, again, I'm not going to get into the details of the conversation. They were comprehensive discussions about what she wanted to achieve on this trip, where she wanted to go, and we provided her the same set of context and information that we have in the past with respect to her overseas travel. I'm not going to get into the details of that.
Phil in the back.
Thank you. I guess I'm wondering, why did the president bother with this drama from the beginning? I mean, why not, rather than saying the military doesn't think it's a good idea to go, why not call the Chinese bluff or tell them to pound sand when they started bellyaching about the possibility of this trip? Given, as you pointed out, there's no change in policy and there's precedent for Pelosi to visit Taiwan.
So what's the drama? What?
Have you watched the Bravies the last couple of weeks? I mean, there's been this question of
Yeah, I've been
whether
here the
or
last
not-
couple of weeks. I haven't
there's been
seen
this
any
question
drama.
of whether or not
I
the
think you're
president wants to see her
manufacturing
go.
it with your question. Look, we have been nothing but clear with the Chinese about where we stand on the issues and the one China policy and our support for a free and open Indo-Pacific. Look, I want to go back to what I said at the beginning, and I hope you took note. Nothing has changed. There's no drama to talk to. It is not without precedent for a Speaker of the House to go to Taiwan if she goes, and I'm not confirming that she is. And it's certainly not without precedent for members of Congress to travel to Taiwan. It has been done this year, and I'm certain that it will be done in the future. We have no interest, as I said in my opening statement, increasing tensions here. We have no interest in changing any of the approach that we take as a government or in keeping with our allies and partners to wanting to see cross-strait tensions be resolved peacefully without a unilateral change. So I don't know about the drama that you're claiming exists. It's quite the contrary here. And the point that we have made, I made it again today, and President Biden made it with President Xi, is everything here is consistent. There's no reason to use a potential visit to justify or to spark some sort of crisis or conflict. We certainly have no interest in that, and there's no justification to use a potential visit as a pretext to conduct what could be escalatory measures, such as the ones I detailed in the opening statement.
Hi, John. You keep saying that the speaker has the right to make her own decision, and another speaker visited before, which I believe you talked about Gingrich when he visited in '97. But it's different timing, there's more tension, and the speaker represents the president's party. So while she has the right to make her own decision, why can you say that the White House disagree with her decision, because that will cause more tension? Can you just say that categorically now that she basically, that the White House disagree with her visit?
I'm sorry, but you're asking me why I can't just say we disagree with the visit?
Correct, because it might, for all the conversation we're just having now, it would cause more tension.
All right, so two things. One, there's been no discussion by the speaker about what's next on her trip. So you're asking me a question as if she's already somehow confirmed that she's going to Taiwan. I haven't seen any such confirmation. And again, I would point you to the speaker and her staff to talk about her itinerary. And number two, again, our responsibility is to make sure that she and her team have all the information they need. And we keep that line of communication throughout a trip, as we should. Of course, it's a requirement. But the speaker and her staff who advises her. They make the decisions.
One question here, if I may follow up, sure. Because of the closeness between the Speaker and the President, it does raise the question about, is she sort of pressing a foreign policy that may, in fact, put the President in a bad position? Is that the sense of this White House?
The President is comfortable with the position that this administration continues to take, which has long-standing historic precedents, and I went through it all at the opening statement. The President's very comfortable with our policy with respect to China and to Taiwan, and he had an opportunity last week to reaffirm those policies and his views in his direct discussion with President Xi.
Okay, just a few more. Go ahead, Jeff, and then Joey.
Thank you very much. Thanks. John, you mentioned the potential of missile launches by China. Are the people of Taiwan at risk if Speaker Pelosi makes this visit? And is she at risk if she makes this visit?
Well, we certainly don't think there's any reason for anybody to be at risk here with a potential visit. Again, hasn't been announced, and I won't speak for Speaker Pelosi. But there's certainly no reason for this to come to blows. There's certainly no reason for this to escalate. And as for the potential risks, I think that is a better question put to the PRC and to the PLA Army and Navy and the Air Force. We're going to watch this very, very closely. We're going to make sure that she has a safe and secure visit, because that's our responsibility. And we urge, as I said at the outset, we urge China to, if she goes, to see this for exactly what it is. Nothing new, no change to our policy, and certainly not an unprecedented visit by the Speaker of the House.
You also said the U.S. will not be intimidated. Do you feel that using language like that right now will be viewed by China in a way that you are also raising rhetoric the way they have?
You said it right at the top, like that they have. They have been out there in recent days with some irresponsible rhetoric. We feel it's important for everybody in the region to understand how seriously we take our security commitments in the Indo-Pacific, and that's why we put it that way. There's no reason, Jeff, for this to honestly, there's just no reason for this to escalate. In fact, there's every reason, given our national security interests as well as the interests of our allies and partners that are at stake in the Indo-Pacific on any given day. There's every reason for this to not escalate, and for the lines of communication to remain open between Washington and Beijing, and that's what we'd like to see happen.
One on Iran. Yeah, thanks, John. Does the White House currently know whether Speaker Pelosi is planning to go to Taiwan? I realize she's not announced anything publicly. You've also said White House officials have been talking to the Speaker's staff. So does the White House currently have knowledge whether she is planning to go to Taiwan?
I am not going to talk about the Speaker's itinerary. I'm just not going to do that. And Jeff, I want to go back to one other thing, if I may, because it was in my mind and I flew out of my mind as I was answering your question. Is when you talk about or you threaten these kinds of potential operations, military operations and exercises and missile launches that I talked about, I mean, what that does is it does increase the risk of miscalculation, as I said, and which could lead to unintended consequences. And that's really the risk. You asked specifically, are they at risk? That's where the risk comes in. It's not so much that there might be a direct attack, but it raises the stakes of miscalculation and confusion, which could also lead to unintended consequences.
Okay, Darlene, and then I'm going to take some in the back. Go ahead, Darlene.
John, given everything that you've laid out here, why do you think China is reacting the way it is reacting to this speaker and this trip?
It's difficult to know specifically, and you're kind of asking me to get inside their brains, and I don't know that I'm comfortable doing that. I think, again, that's a question better put to President Xi and the PRC and their military leaders. There has been, you've heard Chairman Milley talk about this even before we were talking about a potential visit by the Speaker, of increasing aggressiveness by PLA military forces in the region alone. violations in air and sea space across the strait, more aggressive and proximate military exercises, and of course, in their rhetoric. I mean, this has been going on now for months, and if you really want to, you can go back years in terms of Chinese coercion and intimidation tactics, even just in the military environment in the South China Sea, East China Sea. So, been building. I can't account for why they have answered just the possibility of this visit in the manner in which they've done. I can only account for President Biden and for this administration and for how we are trying to manage tensions and, quite frankly, manage this one of the most consequential bilateral relationships in the world. And that is by making it clear what we're seeing, sharing it with you, making it clear that there's no reason, for whatever the reason is, there's no reason that it should spark some kind of conflict or that it should precipitate increased tensions or serve as some sort of pretext for some sort of what they would consider a reaction. If the speaker goes completely consistent with what's been done in the past, and certainly not at all a statement about any change to American policy with respect to one China and to cross-strait tensions, and quite frankly to our obligations under the law to continue to support Taiwan's self-defense.
Okay, we're
And
gonna.
if she does go to Taiwan, how will the White House find out about it? Will she call someone in the NatSec team? Will you see it on television? How will you know?
Well, look, the speaker's flying aboard a military aircraft, so we'll know.
All right, we're just gonna do two in the back, and then we gotta wrap it up. Go ahead, SV, all the way in the back. Yep.
Admiral, you talk about the separation of the Congress and the White House and the executive branch, but when she takes a military aircraft, how then do you, which is under the control of the president, how do you make the case that, well, we had nothing to do with this at all?
I didn't say we had nothing to do with this at all. No, we've never said that at all. We, from the time she informed us that she was going to go overseas, we put the gears in motion like we always do, and that is to provide military transportation. Nothing new about that. Provide our team with information, context. You've heard me, you've heard Karine talk about that. Nothing new about that. I mean, it's not that we're not involved, but we don't make the decision for the speaker. She makes her own decisions. We give her advice and counsel and context. She makes her own decisions, and the president, having long served in the Senate himself, he understands and respects the institutional prerogatives of members of Congress.
All right, last question.